Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie comic interview. It's your host, Cody, and we are keeping it geekly with one of my good friends. I would say one of the very first people I was really introduced within the indie community. My good friend, Ines. How are you doing? Welcome to the stream.
Thank you. I'm
good
so
evening.
To be here. Can I cuss on here? I have the mouth of a sailor, so I'm going to demonetize all your content.
You can cuss.
Okay. I am really fucking excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this all week, so I'm glad we're finally doing it.
So, Ines, my friend, we have talked on so many spaces. We have exchanged so many, just so much wealth of, information and just everything in between. How are you? Let's give a breakdown who you are and what you do to everyone who doesn't know just how much of a treasure you truly are, my friend.
I wouldn't say treasure, but
you are one of the kindest people I've ever met within the indie community.
We literally just had a fight this morning with the on Spaces.
He's like, okay. You haven't seen that side of me.
You haven't, yeah, exactly. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. My name is Enes. I'm a writer and a poet and a little bit of an artist and a podcaster as well, actually. I'm originally from Syria, and I released my debut comic book, Eleutheromania, about a couple of months ago, and it's available for free. And so I've been doing the rounds trying to get the word out about it while I'm working on my next project, which I'm really excited to talk about today. And yeah.
So how did you begin? I mean, what drove you to want to write this book? This book had so much emotion in it, and one of my favorite things is you didn't really have to rely on any sort of really deep dialogue or any deep insane world building. You essentially it felt like wrote your story in almost like a poetic manner and let the artist do so much of the explaining for you, which is the visualization of the expressions and just all the details and everything in between. It was marvelous.
Yeah, I don't think the book would be anywhere near as half as good as it is without the work of the artists, because they really pulled out all the stops. And no matter how much I describe something in a script where I'm yeah, they're experiencing agony now and they're in pain, you can't really it needs a special artist really pull that emotion and put it forward in the way that it did. And so, props first of all to the artists that I worked with, Mattia Monaco and Anton Majagov, who did amazing work. And the lettering as well by Novella was phenomenal. I think it all just really came together really beautifully, and it wasn't. I didn't expect it to look as good as it did, especially for a debut comic book. So I'm really glad that it, turned out the way it was. As for the story, gosh, it's a very sorry. My PS5 just went. Anyway, as for the story, it is I've talked about this in Spaces before. We've talked about this before, but it's inspired by my journey leaving my home country of Syria and traveling abroad, and having lived in that basically a literal war zone and experienced all of the things that were there. Leaving was kind of really hard for me, because even though I was safe physically, I had gotten used to so much that I had back home that I couldn't function. Yeah. And so the idea came from it's you leave a really bad place to a better one, but you feel incapable of moving forward. Because you've been stuck in that bubble for so long. Yeah, you're stuck to that comfort of home. You're stuck to that war zone. You're stuck to worrying about how you're gonna survive the next day. That is what. So I guess, and if you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to. But how was that for you? Emotionally, leaving, finally leaving. Finally getting away from that. God, I remember I had panic attacks nonstop for about a year after I left, and I was I don't understand why this is happening. I left, I am safe now. I don't understand why I'm having panic attacks. And so it didn't stop. It eventually stopped on its own, but I had to really seek out help for it and try to understand what was happening to me. It's just my body, even though I was in a safe environment, did not feel safe, and any loud sounds or snaps or pops would freak me out. So because I associated those sounds with other things from back home. But yeah, it was a really, really rough experience leaving Syria, and I miss it a lot. Of course, I miss the people, I miss my friends, I miss my home, but there was no future there anymore for me, so I had to.
Do you think this book was kind of your way of getting it out there, taking all that and because therapy helps a lot, talking to a professional about working through your feelings, but getting your pain out there for the world to see is another brand new level of therapy that,
It's cathartic. It's literally catharsis. You're like, I'm experiencing my pain or dealing with my trauma through the eyes of a fictional character and this fictional scenario that I invented. So it helps me deal with it in a way that they're dealing with it. And that's the reason why I tried to like make it so vague, is because I felt like my experience, while very specific and narrow, could be applied to a lot of different scenarios. Like it doesn't have to just be you're leaving a war zone. You could be leaving a toxic relationship. You could be leaving an abusive household. You could
addiction,
be like all
even
sorts of things. Yeah. So I felt like my experience, my feelings were, kind of universal in a way. And so I wanted to keep the story and the poetry as vague as possible so that anybody can see themselves reflected in those stories. And so it resonated with a lot of people, thankfully.
I really, man, just hearing your year of like suffering, like I remember reading in the later issue, like when you're like the character is breaking from the chains and you see the scars from the chains, like, and it stays like you're scarred from that point forward. And you even like, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but even like the thought bubble was orange, like your thoughts were scarred from that point forward. Wow, Anas, that was deep. Like, was that your intention?
That was my intention, yes.
Wow.
And then as the story progresses forward, the scars end up basically consuming the character, the sentient star, this being in space, and so they burn in a bright red fire, like this bright red light, and it's the same light as their scars, and that's because they basically learned to use that pain to move forward, and that was basically what I was trying to get across.
Like I knew, because I had to save some juice, like, because I've been wanting to really crack into it. You know how hard it's been not to like ask you some of those questions, like, because like I'm like I gotta save it because this is some of the juiciest stuff, and it ended up, that was such a deep and like thought-provoking response, man. Like, so you left Syria. Like, how'd you come across even like making the book? What drove you to want to make this? Like, were you thinking of how you could like take this pain and like put it somewhere, and like what different mediums? Like,
so I've loved comic books my whole life. Like, I grew up reading comic books. That's been my go-to medium. But I also love writing poetry. So Eleutheromania was initially born out of a poem, which was the poem for Act 1. And that was me putting my pain into this, idea. And then the second poem came when I was like trying to overcome it. So the duration between like the space between I wrote the two poems was probably like 2 years apart. And then I felt like I really wanted to tell this story and I wanted to get that message across, but I didn't know if I wanted it to have a visual medium. I just knew that. And I was at film school at the time, and I was like, maybe it could be a short film, but I was like, there's no way I'm gonna have a budget to like build a giant wall or like CGI a giant wall and have a boulder or whatever. I ended up scripting it and then slowly transitioning it into a comic book, and then I decided like, yes, I think it would be great as a one shot. And then the fear sets in, where it's like, but what kind of comic book is this? Like, who's the audience? Who's the, it's very niche. Who is this for? And
I literally think it could apply to every single person. Like, I think there's something that holds you back in life that you can break free. And I think your comic is the way you worked it could apply to almost any medium. And that's the beauty of it, because my biggest thing, and like, I'm not trying to go on a tangent here, but like, I love, like, everybody goes through hell, and what your hell and my hell, we're not here to like see whose hell is better, but it's how you walk through that hell and how you hold yourself that determines how you come out on the outside. And like, everybody goes through shit, and it doesn't matter how bad or how much worse your shit stinks. Shit stinks,
Yeah.
So I think, in layman's term, that's kind of rough layman's term. I think this kind of applies in that same sense. Like, everybody goes through troubles, and I think you could really benefit from the message hidden like in this comic, really. And anyone that's interested, I just posted that link. That's his website. You can get on there. You could actually read this for free, with the option to buy it physically. So did you pay out of pocket for like the art and everything?
Everything.
So why go free with your first debut?
Well, because as I said, like, the story is so niche in terms of comic books. Like, yes, indie comics have all sorts of stories, but the fact that I was incorporating poetry and comics and telling this abstract story, I was like, who the frick is gonna buy this? So I thought I couldn't really ask someone to like invest money into a story that they had no idea I can't really tell them what it's about because it's gonna spoil the whole thing for them. So I was like, okay, I'll put this one out. It's gonna be my first. It'll be free. and then for the next one, I'll put up like the first teaser, like a preview pages, and then I'll make them buy it. And if like anybody who was interested in the first one, then maybe they'll be more likely to buy it.
See, I told you guys, one of the nicest people in the indie comic community.
And it ended up, it worked out for the best, because a lot of people that did read it, like you included, did end up buying a physical copy because they wanted to support it.
And it was one of those things, like reading it in a physical medium for me just hit so much harder. I love digital, don't get me wrong, but nothing beats opening up a comic book. And it might be weird, but the smell of a brand new comic, it's just, I'm 32 and I can never get over the feeling of like being in that environment, looking at books, like, and I hope I never lose that. Like, I think that is like what keeps me going. And man, this book was just so, so when you were getting the art, how did you go ahead and like find your artist? How was that experience, and how did you feel getting that first page?
Okay, so the arts is a whole different story, because Act 1 took a really long time for it to come together. Like it was really difficult to get the pages done. We started working on the book with Act 1 back in August, and I had a release date in mind that was going to be November 11th. I was like, I really want to release it on November 11th, 2021. Like that was like a cool date in my mind to have it to put it out then. By November 11th, we had like 5 pages of art done, and so it was extremely slow. No fault of the artist, of course. It was just like a lot of things happened, and I ended up keep pushing the release date. So by the time I started working on Act 2 with Mattia, I had the cover art done, the logo done, the promo art done, the soundtrack done. Like I had everything.
You got a soundtrack too?
Together. Yeah, I had everything done except the pages.
Hey, we got J. Michael Miller in the chat saying, "I'm with you, Cody. I waited to read full comics until physical arrived, still because of it." I know. I had the digital. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna order the physical. And for me, if I have a physical coming, I'll wait to read the digital. It's kind of like a double-edged sword though, too, because I try to read it the day of the interview, and like it's sitting there on my shelf, just tantalizing me, like, Cody, open me up, please.
Yeah, I get that. I prefer physical all the time as well.
Well, for me too, because I'm doing this thing where I'm starting a comic border, like you see my game room around the wall.
Yeah.
So it's so awesome to have these physicals, just like, it feels cool. It feels cool. It feels nerdy. Thank God I have a significant other, because it would probably be hard to find a significant other that would be so cool with me just doing that, nerding out an entire room.
It's the den.
So let's go ahead and start, because I want to break down this comic more, but I think we're going to try something new, guys. So usually with these interviews, when I interview someone, we have a Kickstarter to work off of, but that's not always the case. I don't want to just exclude people, who only have Kickstarter, or people without Kickstarter. So we're going to actually pull up his comic and go through some of the panels, go through some of the pages, and like some of his favorite parts, and kind of like what his thought process was. So right here is the cover page. So let's go ahead and start breaking this down. What was the representation with the eye and then the chains?
So I really wanted to have like the original concept, which didn't really pan out as I wanted it to, but we ran with it anyway, was to have a close-up of an iris, and the iris would have like a reflection on it that would show the two hands being chained together, but it ended up being like kind of like the hands are popping up from the eye, which also worked, I guess.
Yeah.
But the whole concept was like fear, shock, and chains, and the chains are pulling the hands together, so they're like breaking apart like glass.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see that like the fractures on the hands there, on the wrists.
Yeah.
Yep. So that was kind of like the concept of like, a person breaking apart because of those really tight chains, and their eyes just like widening in fear and shock.
I really, I think it, I'm not an artist, but I would almost imagine it would be really hard. Like you could tell right here, like it was like the reflection look, because just like the way the light is, but it'd be really hard to kind of do the reflection like right here, like with the iris, and like take away from that. I still think what you were trying to like provoke within the consumer, like was you succeeded though, like your imagery in that. And then just right here is the creative team involved in the process as well. So you had 2 different artists?
Yes, so Anton did Act 1 and Mattia did Act 2. Anton is a really talented graphic designer and illustrator from Russia, and Mattia is a published artist with Aftershock Comics, and he's from Italy. And I found him on a Facebook group for connecting comic book writers and artists.
So what was the reasoning behind two different artists? I mean, did you the first act was more like grayscale, right?
Yeah.
So like
I wanted two different like feels and two different vibes for each act because they are two different stories. So when Anton was doing Act 1, I was like, this is freaking beautiful. But for Act 2, I really wanted like the script had a space theme in it, and I really wanted those blue tones and red tones to like pull through. And so we decided to keep Act 1 black and white and like grayscale, and then get a different artist to color and do Act 2.
All right. And then here's your special thanks. Was there anyone you wanted to give a special thanks while we're live on the air?
Literally everyone who's been thanked in the comic book is everyone who like these are my friends. They worked so hard with me to like bring this project to life, and they supported me while I was making it and going through like insane imposter syndrome, being like, what am I even doing? This is garbage. So yeah.
And not even that, but coming from like a literal war zone on top of that, like it had to have been such a difficult time period, man. Like, damn.
I mean, no, this was like a while back. Like I left Syria back in 2015. And yeah, so the wound has like catheterized. It's
I gotcha. So this was 2022. So you recently just debuted this.
Exactly.
I gotcha. Okay. So in my head, like it was like a 1-2 year period. Sorry about that.
Oh no, it's been a while. I don't think I could have done something so raw and like get into it so fast. So
that's why I was like, damn, dude, you have like the iron will of like a Shaolin monk or something. Like,
yeah. I needed that time to heal and just like reflect on everything, of course.
So right here is Act 1, and this is kind of where the story begins. And I really like, right here, just the detail of this heavy ball being dragged and just the chains that are bound. I thought it was really just a striking visualization. And you see kind of everyone dragging these balls alongside too. So what's the representation for this, having multiple people carry the ball like alongside with you?
So the idea was that I really wanted a slow reveal, like to kind of build up to it. And so the first couple of panels were like just showing the ball, zooming out a little bit, and then the second page would be like splash page, shows you the entire scene where it's 3 individuals dragging the ball. So the two individuals are basically the motivators in the story for the middle character. You have the person who was ahead of our center character, who was the middle, and the person who was behind. And as you step forward, scroll down a little bit, in the next page, you will notice that this person behind the main character ends up, collapsing.
Yeah. And
that is the motivation that they need to break free from those chains, because they're like, I don't want to end up like that. Like, I need to break free. That cannot be me.
And that was probably seen a lot of friends and family like perish, unfortunately, within the war.
Basically, yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
And then
so realizing that you need to like really move forward.
And this expression right here, like
panic and realization, like, yeah.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about too. Like the way the artist was able to like, right here, like the dread, and then noticing he collapsed, and then like right here you see his face just like break with like fear.
Yeah.
And then like the anguish, like just he captured it really beautifully.
Thank you, Anton.
Was it hard not to like superimpose yourself within this? With it like being like so like deep within your story, like not putting more of yourself into it?
That was actually very easy, because I did want to make it as distant from me as possible. Yeah, I did not. That's why I made like the characters. I mean, okay, now I have a shaved head basically, but this was like done this week. But yeah, I said like to the artist, I don't want the characters to have any features that define them. I want them to be plain and to be like a stock model, basically, like just bland, because again, you can see yourself reflected in the characters. So their features, their clothing, their lack of clothing is just like very basic. For that exact reason, is like you can see yourself in that position, you can see yourself in that character. So yeah, the main character struggles, manages to finally pull off the chains, which are literally like super easy to take off, but it's just like that mental thing where it's like you just have to like kind of take it off your shoulders, but they didn't realize it at the time. and they're convinced that they have to break free, and eventually they do. They let go and they collapse to the ground, and
So
then they struggle to
what was the representation behind this though? Finally breaking free from what's like held you for so long, and then when you do,
Yeah.
you collapse and lose it. Like what was the meaning
collapse
behind
from
that?
exhaustion, because it's like
Exhaustion.
that weight off your shoulders that's finally been released. And so there's like a tinge of relief, but at the same time, like if you see the next panel, they start to get up and then they're unable to. They collapse again because their legs are or their bodies are so used to dragging that weight behind that they don't know how to function without it.
And you know, the way grief and like trauma like weighs you down, it's almost in a comforting aspect. And another thing I wanted to talk about is like you mentioned how the chain, like it was so easy to lift. There's a thing I think with like elephants, like where you could tie them up and put them on like a stick, like something like where they could easily rip it out of the ground, but they
I've heard
won't.
of that, yeah.
They won't, because they won't know the difference. They think they're just bolted to the ground. So it's almost like the same like translation here, like how you could just leave, but it's so hard to leave because like it's a brand new world out there, you know?
Yeah. So here they finally start realizing that they're unable to get up, and then they look ahead of them and they see that this person who was walking ahead of them is getting even further. And it's kind of like this race where it's like this person is moving on, is able to continue moving, but I am now unable to. So they start like clawing with their fingers and their nails, trying to like pull themselves forward and really like struggling. And we had to like really like darken the hands here to like show that there's been like damage to the hand. So we had like, you know, I initially I thought maybe it would be cool to like have a single, like a few panels having blood on them with like in red to break through all the white, black and white, and then just have like a hands dripping with blood to just like showcase how they're like pulling themselves forward and their hands are like hurting through digging in the sands. But eventually we decided against it. We just went with like a darker, more scratchy grunge vibe.
So what part of your life did this represent? Like, were you seeing a lot of friends and family leave and while you were unable to?
No, this was me being like having left and being unable to be happy, really.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things you did to kind of like, I guess, like breaking outside of this? Like, what were some of the things you did as a person to kind of like start to be happy? Like to start to kind of really just embrace like this is like your new life? Because that, like for me, like I never experienced that. I have the privilege of like, you know, where I'm at, like never having to experience that. But like for you on the other side of the world, like that was like your life. That's like your everyday, you know, that's like, so how was that for you? Like finally like learning to be happy again?
I will let you know when I get there.
It's a work in progress. Hey, but I mean,
it is a work in progress. Yeah.
Yeah, but so what have you been doing, I guess, to kind of like achieve that, like to achieve those steps?
This kind of thing, like these creative outlets where I'm able to just express myself through art, through poetry, through writing, through making comics, just like those creative endeavors which make me feel like I'm actively doing something and making something of my life and feeling like I'm accomplishing things in a way, which is really messed up. But like when you're in Syria, you don't feel like your life is gonna amount to anything. You feel like you're just gonna be another number, you know, another casualty, and you're not gonna amount to anything. So leaving, you feel like you really have to honor that and you have to like make it count. Like, yeah, I was one of the, like, there are so many people back home who are still struggling to leave. And it's like, I have to make sure that I earned it and I deserve it and that I'm making something out of what I got. So yeah, just being able to tell these kind of stories and being able to express myself through art and connecting with other people and other creators, I guess is like part of it.
Yeah, if it means anything, when I read this, like it helped me kind of like reflect a lot on my life. Like I didn't come from a, you know, what you came from, the hell that you came from, but I came from hell as well. And like, it just really struck me on such a deep level. I was really grateful that I had the chance to read this. I mean, if anything, at the end of the day, I feel like if you were to stop creating comics right now, this debut book would be amazing. You know, this would be something that you could be proud of. Like, I know you are probably going through the imposter syndrome, but like as me as a consumer, like this was a good book. And that's like, I love this book. I thought this book was phenomenal. So I just want you to hear that from me. Like, I think,
and I appreciate that coming from you, because like I do, you know, hold your opinion in such high regard. So thank you.
Stop. Hey, seriously though, man, because like I know it has to be hard leaving that, and you want to amount to something. You created something beautiful, something that I think if people read, they're going to resonate with, and hopefully they're going to learn like they can break away from this, because it might seem impossible, but with enough dragging yourself by your fingertips, you can get to it, and you're doing it right now. Each day you're dragging yourself to be happy, and that's I'm gonna drag myself with you. We're gonna do this together. We're in this together. So now we see, and like I said, the artist just does such a good job in capturing this emotion. The following the person in lead and dragging, and then you see him shouting the no. What was the no meant to be?
Just the pure like pinnacle of desperation. This was like their breaking point, where they finally realized, like in the following page, that there is no other way and they have to go back to the chains in order to be able to move again. So that's why Eleutheromania is split into like two halves, or two different stories. In like Act 1, the character decides that they're unable to move on and they can't get up and they can't move forward, so they decide to go back to the chains that were holding them captive and to continue with them. And in Act 2, it goes a different way, where they're like, they embrace those scars, they embrace the pain, and they find a way to own it, basically, and make it their own and move forward.
All right, hold on one second, because we're still crawling back at the mode. So we're trapped in purgatory.
Yes.
For all parts of you. And
that likes to be controlled.
Yeah, we see the chains coming back on, and the determination that like to be controlled. And then this is Act 2, and this is when we it's a whole brand new like color scheme, brand new take. What was kind of some of your, you said you wanted to make it a little bit different, but why? Like, what drove you to want to go with this theme in particular?
I'm a sci-fi nut. Like, I love Silver Surfer, I love Doctor Who, I love the Expanse. Like, I just love me a space book. So I was like, I need to make a way to like tell a space story, and I really wanted to like write. I've always wanted to like write about a sentient star, and so I kind of like brought that into the mix, and the character in Act 2 was born, which in my mind is still a sentient star, but nobody really like, you don't get that when reading it. But that's why I had the character be drawn in like a fetal position, and that they, because like it's a dot, it's a circle when you look at it from afar. But then,
when I was reading it, my interpretation, like I initially thought that this was the person who was controlled, breaking the chains and finally like embracing the change and moving forward with it. So it's awesome that you broke it down, because I never would have perceived it as that, and I don't know why. Now that you say it, it makes perfect sense. But like when I initially, I thought it was like a representation of like his spirit,
No, I mean, every interpretation is valid. It's the way you consume the story, after all.
Isn't that beautiful though? Isn't it beautiful how you wrote this to be perceived, and how I perceived it was like two different things, but it's still like the same meaning. I think that's awesome.
The same way. Exactly, yeah. So Act 2 was always supposed to like represent a different character, a different story, a different approach to dealing with those chains. And so this sentient star basically wakes up, and they're glowing as bright as they can. They're like at peace, and they're just like stretching, and before you know it, there's just like the chains attack them, and they can't really hide from what they've been running from, which was the chains.
I really like these panels too.
This is my favorite page.
Yeah, I really like how they did.
I think I've used this in like every promo material I could.
The way the chains like bleed off the page like into the panels, I thought was really awesome, and just how you have the character in the middle like bringing it all together.
That's Mattia. That's all Mattia. I had them written in the script as like different panels, and each of them was like a limb, kind of like that Yu-Gi-Oh page.
Like Exodia.
Yeah. So Mattia had the idea to make it a splash page and just like split it in 4 halves, 4 quarters, and it was perfect.
Yeah, and I think Mattia like killed it. This is such like a really like visually striking page. And it's unique to hear how you originally gave the idea for it. Mattia's like, no, I got this. Like, scrap that, I got this.
So the thing is like when you're working with foreign artists, I try to be as descriptive as I can, because I'm like, they're gonna Google Translate this probably, because their English is not, when I'm communicating with them and I'm like getting to know them, I can like notice that their English isn't to the level. So I try to make my script as clear as possible, so there's no miscommunication at all, because I've been through that pitfall before. So I'm like, okay, if I run this through Google Translate to Italian, is it gonna make sense? And so I try to like tell it as much as I can, but eventually he did, take it and he ran with it in his own way, and it turned out beautifully. And
So
I don't ever go back and be like, no, that's not really what I had in mind. Like I'm like, no, that's your vision. You expressed it that way. You experienced it that way. I love it. Like go with it.
so I'm a big believer in like letting an artist do their creative,
Same.
like because that's how you're gonna get the best work. I feel that's you're gonna get because they're gonna want to be invested. They're gonna want to like produce the best they can. So that's always been a philosophy for me, and I think you really like. I think you did the best thing because like both your artists like absolutely killed it. Like in these parts particular, like when you see the blade or the chains like start to really wrap around and start to really capture them, like the fear. The way it's like really wrapping around the arms and starting to really like take hold is just what I thought was like awesome. Like your artist really killed it in this, and then your writing, like they were almost like in perfect harmony with one another. And then this is when you see the lettering, with the blue around it. So that
Order,
was yeah. I thought that was really cool. You said that was all intentional as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when we see straining eyes from woes. The kind of the conflict of breaking from these chains, like for the last official time.
Yeah. So in here, the concept was like, as the chains would wrap around the body, it would dim the lights and like basically put out that spark, that fire that we have inside.
So that's why they're turning gray.
Yeah.
Wow, dude. What?
Yeah.
I see. This was such a good idea. I need to do this. This is literally going to be the start of something new in Ness. Like, thank you for like doing this with me. Like, because like I thought that was in an effort to kind of like allow more detail. Like with I almost presumed this was like veins or like cracking from the chains.
Yeah, that's just like spreading its it's poison and like
yeah.
Light.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then like you see the light like oh my god. And then just the raw emotion and everything was just captured brilliantly. And then this is when you're starting to fight against it.
Yeah.
And we eventually see the chain break. Yeah.
Collapse.
So when was that moment the chain broke free for you?
I guess when I came over that like survivor's guilt, where it's like you leave and you feel so guilty for being the one that made it out when so many haven't and so many didn't survive that experience. And so it's a lot of like survivor's guilt, and I still struggle with it sometimes, but for the most part I feel like I've overcome that, thankfully, and I've learned to like just accept that things that are out of my control, I can't really help it, and I just have to make the best out of what I was able to create and what I was able to have in my life, thankfully, just being alive here.
Yeah.
So that was the moment where I was like able to break free.
And when the character breaks free, we see the remnants of the chains, the scars wrapped around the arms.
Yeah.
I thought that was really visually striking. And as soon as this happens, that's when we see like the lettering around the words start to change as well. So I thought that was a really intricate touch. I thought that was like, I'm like, wow, like when I read this for the first time, you could tell you really, you and the creative team put your heart and souls into this.
We meant to, so I'm glad that you can see through that. But it's again such an interesting way to like, when you write something that's so abstract that you can't really decipher it and like just one way to look at it. So it's really interesting to see how you perceived it, and that versus like how I wrote it and then how the artist interpreted it. Like it's such a cool way to like see how the story comes in so many different ways.
Like for me, like it was almost like when you go through all of this hurt and pain and finally overcome it, like these are the scars that you're left with, like because you never fully heal. Like that's like the unspoken truth of everything. When you go through trauma and stuff, you learn to overcome it, you learn to work around it, but it's always there. Because you could still be happy in life, but you still will always remember that. And that's kind of like for this was like my visual, like my representation of this is like these scars are always going to be. Yeah, these scars are always going to be with you. You're always going to know them, but you could still live with it. You could still move forward. Like these scars don't define who you are. That's what I took away.
And that's exactly it. They don't make you any less. They don't make you, they don't dim your light any less. You can just glow and be who you are regardless. Or, not regardless, but like in spite of, basically.
And then this is around the lettering, the outline, how it changed from blue to orange. Why did you choose those colors? Any particular reason between that?
Just was like referring to a fire, like the redness and the like this, embers basically glowing.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I really wanted the character to evolve from like being a star to a supernova or like a sun, which is a red dwarf. So that's why they basically turn into a sun. So here they're like the character is struggling with their scars, but they learn to embrace them.
Mm-hmm.
And that even though they're in uncharted waters and they don't know what they're looking at, this is all very new to them. They're alone in this experience. They learn to embrace it.
This is gorgeous too. And it's when you mentioned the supernova, I just pretty much thought this was evolving into the person you were destined to become. I love this so much, breaking this down with you and stuff. It's my first time I really had to do, I had a chance to do this and had the opportunity to give my thoughts with what you were trying to portray. This is awesome, dude.
So yeah, they calm themselves down. They just remind themselves of who they are. And then the light starts to glow again, and they, burn brighter and brighter until they, turn into a red giant.
And then what's the red giant, the final representation of that?
It's just embracing your wounds and moving forward. Embracing your scars.
That was deep. And then do you want to touch base upon any of this, your thank you message in the back?
I mean, anybody can read it because it's available for free, but yeah.
You actually,
it's just me talking about
yeah,
I wrote this while I was we were knee deep into the book, and I was just sitting on my laptop. I was I need to make progress on this book at this point. So I just decided to write the end page, and those end pages at the end of a comic book are always my favorite to read. Just to get the artist and the writer's perspective and the story. I love to read those, so I really wanted to do that, and yeah, I did. I have my own end comic book credit page.
And then once again, guys, here is the site for that. You can get the digital for free. You can read it for free, but you could buy the physical, and the physical is not that expensive. I think it was under $10 for shipping and everything.
Yeah, probably. If you're in the US, yeah, it's very cheap. Some of my friends had to pay top dollar to get it shipped to worldwide, $18 for shipping or so, but they still did it anyway to support me.
Man, that honestly, because I remember we were talking and I'm hey, I want to try something new. Let's go over this. That was the first time I've ever done that. And that literally, I think, set a standard because I think what I had in my head and what you created, it was remarkable to kind of see the similarities, yet how different they were,
But again, as long as the message at the end of the day is being received, that's all that matters. You can interpret it in any way you want.
And that's the beauty of art. And
that's what matters to me.
So where do we go from here? You said you had another project. We don't have to spoil too much, but
no. I'm dying to be able to talk about this project. The reason why I've been so secretive about it is because I really want to pitch it, and I don't want to reveal too much. And then in case if a publisher doesn't want to pick it up, I want to self-publish it. So I want to be able to just drop it. But I'm working on my next comic book. It's also a one-shot. Also incorporates poetry, but this time with prose as well and narration. It's currently being edited by Michelle Abinader, who did the anthology, The Color of Always, which was phenomenal, and being drawn by a very good friend of mine who is an artist from Netherlands. His name is Dennis Menhier. I probably butchered his last name, but he is literally one of the most talented people I've ever seen, period. And when I saw his work, I was I reached out immediately and I was we need to work on something together. And we are right now. And after this, we have 2 different projects that we're planning on creating as well. One of them is a mini series and one of them is a long running series. So we're planning on working together for a very long time.
This next thing is going to be a one shot then?
Yes, it's going to be a one shot, a bit longer than Eleutheromania, way less abstract. It's called Etheris. And it's about afterlife.
So what's the name mean? I know your first one had a really deep, significant meaning to it. What's the meaning of this title?
So this is from the ether, which is referring to the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And Etheris is this realm that I created called, Etheris, where all the souls that don't belong anywhere else end up in. So when you don't belong in heaven or in the underworld or in hell, you end up in Etheris. And it's about a character's journey through that realm after she dies.
Okay, all right. So
Yeah.
what makes you not go to heaven or hell? Like, what puts you in this realm?
Well, that's a spoiler.
Okay, all right. Hey, you get me invested.
I've
I'm
already
good.
said way more than I have anywhere else.
You get me invested. I'm good at fishing for more. And
I've given you like a lot. Like so far up till now, I've been like covering up the title with like a redacted
Yeah,
thing.
I seen that.
Yeah.
Hey,
So some people
I
actually
appreciate it. And
some people
I'm
actually thought
excited.
the project is called Redacted, and I'm like, no, it's not. I'm just hiding the name because I wasn't ready to announce the title.
So what? This is your first official announcement?
Basically, yeah, you're getting
No, dude,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, I remember you sharing the artwork with me, and I was just like blown away, man. Shoo, it's gonna be so
Right.
good. And then,
As
so what?
Dennis.
Your miniseries and long series, what kind of ideas do you got for those, or are those still kind of like on the back burner?
They're not really on the back burner. We're planning on like starting to churn those out this year. So I'm hoping for Etheris to come out sometime this summer or maybe like early
That's
fall.
close.
Mhm.
That's close. So any sort of Kickstarter with that, or you're going straight to a publisher?
I'm going straight to a publisher. Fingers crossed. If it doesn't work out though, we will end up, either kickstarting it or just publishing it like I did with Eleutheromania, without a campaign or anything, just like putting it out there. But it's not going to be for free this time, so
Yeah,
people will have to pay for it. But I would really like to get a publisher because it's like one of my dreams and one of Dennis's dreams as well to like have a comic book of ours be in a comic book store.
Yeah.
And so I really want to make it happen for us to like, have this diamond number like for distribution and just having people like pre-order the copies and like get a physical copy in their comic book store. Like that's a dream of mine that I would like to tick off.
That would
the
be
bucket
so
list, the old
awesome.
bucket list. Yeah.
So, was it different writing narration, like breaking that format of like taking just poetry and adding like a little bit more meat to it?
It was scary because again I got used to the way I was writing Eleutheromania and I was developing the script, and writing Etheris is such a different experience because I'm basically writing the inner thoughts of this woman who's experiencing death and the afterlife, and that she's describing the world around her, and I want to make sure that she's not being overly descriptive, that she takes away from the poems, because the poems are also like telling her story, and at the same time I want to give her like her voice and I want to empower her. And so it was a very easy balance to get lost in, and thankfully like I had Michelle to help guide me through that. And like working on the script with Michelle, who was the editor on the book, has been like so much fun. Like we sat down, we had a call, and we just like went through it all together, and it was so much fun just like sharing something with that, because I haven't shared the script with anybody except Dennis, basically. So it was very reaffirming to see somebody so talented tell me like, oh my god, you're really good. I'm like, holy shit, am I actually decent?
Was you worried about doing the female narration justice? I mean, being like a male, like, our thinking, the way we think and our thinking patterns are, slightly different. So like, did you have to do any sort of like digging or investigation or research to kind of make sure you were nailing that?
I definitely did, and I genuinely like I for the longest time I was like, if I don't end up getting a female editor on this book to like make sure that I'm doing it justice, I might just like hire a couple of beta or sensitivity readers to make sure that them reading it comes across the way that I would like it to come across, and it's not coming off male gazy, or I don't want it to I want to do it justice. I want to do her voice justice, and this character that I care so much about, that I want her to tell her story in the best way possible. And I think her story is very universal as well. It's not like the experiences that she's describing, it's not really like it defies the gender spectrum. It really like goes beyond that. So she's just experiencing death and loss and trying to move forward in this world that she knows nothing of. Again, it's just like a common theme with me, basically.
I was about to say, like, is this like a second part to your life story? Like, it seems like this is kind of like the nail in the coffin for that experience for you.
They say write what you know, which isn't always true, but I am writing what I know, and I'm trying to like deliver different things through these stories. And if it all works out soon enough, they will be maybe compiled into a trade paperback. So they do exist in the same like theme. Like they do share common themes, but they're very different art style wise and like narratively, but they do share the same theme of like telling stories about pain and loss and trauma and trying to overcome them.
Yeah, and wow, it just, so I mean, I guess what would this story be like a representation, like it, like for you, like if you had to put it in like a simpler words, like what part of your journey does this represent?
It's really about like overcoming self-loathing and just accepting who you are as a human being, as a flawed person who makes mistakes, who's hurt others, who's, you know, trying to grow and learn from that and be better, and just giving yourself the time of day and like allowing yourself to forgive yourself, really. Man,
really deep, really deep. Anas, you gotta love yourself, dude. You're such an awesome individual. Stop making these comics that are so sad.
Yeah, eventually I'm gonna get around to making like a comedy, but for now I'm gonna get all this dark stuff out of the way. Like literally, I everything I write, everything I touch is just like dark, and then
he's like, I promise I'll be happy one day, guys.
And like everything I've written out, like I have, you know, tons of poems and tons of scripts that I've created that I hope to like make into comics someday. They're all super dark and depressing, and then there's this one like sci-fi comedy love story that's like super bubbly and lighthearted. I'm like, we'll get there, we'll get to you someday. We'll like
like you like brush the dust off, you're like soon
exactly.
So we touched base upon your debut, we touched base upon what's coming next. Let's talk about your podcast, though. I like, you know, trying to give as much exposure in all the different facets of your life. So what's this podcast about? What do you do? And where are you going with it?
So we have a podcast called Geekable, which is close to Geekly. Geekly was actually one of the names that we were thinking of going with, but we ended up going with Geekable. So this podcast that I host with my very good friend, Nick, who we've known each other for like 7 years at this point. And we basically just like really wanted a space to like geek out and talk about comics. Like that was the excuse of making a podcast. Like we love comics. We call each other every week to talk about our pull lists and like talk about what worked and what didn't and what we loved. And so we were like, let's just make it into a podcast. And we did. And then we were like, I would love to talk to some writers and creators about this. So we ended up contacting some of them and they responded.
You talked to some big names too.
Yeah, and they got on the show, and I'm like, how are we doing this? How are we pulling this off? Like,
what did you do? Did you just send them out a message, and they're like, yeah?
Literally just, DM them.
What? What? Here's me like thinking I need to hit a magic number, and you're like,
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Like literally, when we got Bob Quinn, who was like our first interviewee, we had like maybe 50 followers on Instagram, and I was like, there's no way he's gonna go for that. But then he did, and then we used like, you know, Bob Quinn's name as like a, you know, to like give ourselves, you know, legitimacy.
Credibility.
Like, we had Bob Quinn on. Would you like to be our next guest?
Oh my god! And like, yeah. So like that.
And then
was
the names just kept piling up, and there was like, oh, we had Kelly Thompson, we had Leah Williams, we had Arthur Adams, we had all these legends. Would you like to be next? And so, you know, we ended
How
up.
does that feel though? Like interviewing those people of that caliber, like that had to have been nerve-wracking.
It is nerve-wracking, and especially like everything you say, it's like you have to be careful what you say. And I did like fuck up a couple of times during interviews, which I was like still learning the process and like what to say and what not to say. But I won't say that.
An example. What do you mean, like not to say?
I mean, I've ticked a guest or two off.
I gotcha.
Yeah, like one time I made a really like a stupid joke that was, you know, ill-timed to say the least, and the guest basically wanted to like get into it, and I was like, no, I was just like mentioning it in passing, like we do not need to get into this, and you know, we had to get into it eventually. And another time I kind of pressed someone on a fan theory that's been teased, and I really pushed on it, and I was like, I'm sure it's real, and I just wanted that confirmation, not knowing that they couldn't give me confirmation because they had like word not to give confirmation about it.
Yeah, NDA.
Yeah, and they ended up getting upset as well, and I'm like, I apologize, of course, and I followed up with emails and be like, I'm so sorry, but you know, you live and you learn, you know, you live with those lessons.
How do you not like fanboy? Like, how do you guys like not like get like sucked into that? Like,
yeah, we fanboy a lot. Like when they come in the room, we're like, oh my god, you're here, we love you so much.
We didn't think you were gonna show. Yeah, I've been meeting some high caliber people in the industry, and I had one fanboy experience, and it was like late. It was like 4, 6 in the morning. Like, it was one of those things, like, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I was in a space. They're like, do you want to chat? You want to ask some questions with this person? Like, and I'm like, yeah, I've watched this person's work. Yeah, I want to ask some questions. And we talked for hours. And then I remember I went to go ask a question, but it was like, I put too much into it. Like, I started like fanboying, like, oh, well, I watched this. Like, did you take this? And like, introduce it to this. And I remember my buddy's like, whoa, Cody, like, take a breath. Breathe, re-ask that. And I'm like, you're right. But it's hard, because like, we're just the little people. So like, when the big people are like giving us the spotlight, it's like, tell us more.
Literally. Yeah. And I've had that, of course. And like, I know who you're referring to, and I've had that as well with the same person where I'm just like fanboying out. I'm just like geeking out about it. But at the end of the day, you remember they're just people too, and they're just excited
and
about
they
you.
have imposter syndrome too. Like, yeah. they're like, why is this person flipping? It's like, for me, there's people who are like, I'm honored to be on your show, and I'm like, what do you mean? I have 500 subs on YouTube. Like, I'm a dad. Like, I'm just some regular guy. And there's people like telling me how like it made their day. Like, Nicholas Dalton drew me a picture because I was the first person in like 2 years to talk to him. Because he's been creating his graphic novel every day, and like, he's been trying to get into the indie comic scene. And like, I'm the type of guy, like, if you got a book and you're passionate about it, I want to talk about it. Let's talk about it. That's my mindset. But like, for him, like that's what he needed. And like, that was like my mission statement from that point forward.
You're providing that space, which is like no small feat. Like, you're doing it. You're growing rapidly. You're doing amazing things. You're hosting a lot of people, and you're giving them a voice. You're letting them tell their stories, talk about their project, and it's admirable. Come on, you are doing something great here.
I mean, I don't know. I have fun. Like, and I guess that's the difference.
If you get to call me a human treasure, then I get to call you.
Stop. Like, for me, this is fun though. I love comics. Like, there's a lot of people like fake it to make it or whatever. Like, I could give two shits less if I ever make money from this. My biggest goal, if I make money from this, is to have it circling into buying comics. I literally have a coffee tier, $5. You can buy me a comic. I take that money and I put it back into backing projects.
Actually, buying a comic book.
Yeah, and like, my thing is like, I do Twitch streaming. I've done that for 6 years. I make money from that, like nothing livable, but it funds. I've taken that channel and I've made it like self-funding. Like, it buys all the new games that come out. I have a little extra to kind of invest into the setup. I got my mic from there. So before I started podcasting, I had this SM7B. It's funny though. You said Geekly, like my name. And a lot of people don't know this, but I'm more than happy to share the story. So I actually started out as a duo, Talk Geekly. So that started as a love for comics with one of my good friends. I was a Twitch streamer. He would watch me, and we'd always get in arguments about comics. We'd always talk about like how we were last night, like how things connect and how, the conspiracy web and everything. And someone's like, you guys should do a podcast about this. And like, so we would be drunk. This was like back when I used to drink. I haven't drank in almost 2 years. And, we would always just be shit-faced, like just talking comics, and we're like, we should start recording this. And then we did what you did. We literally would each read 3 books. He'd read 3 Marvel. I'd do 3 DC. We'd have 3 pieces of news, and we would do a show. And basically that went on for about a year. We broke apart. We then, after a year, got back together, and it just ended up crashing horribly. We both had very conflicting thoughts. I wasn't very eager to learn. And I don't like to talk bad about anyone else. But basically what happened was I got kicked out because he had all permissions to every group. Like, so he made like the Facebook page and all that. And he was editor, so he kicked me out. I'm like, okay, so we are breaking apart. So we always had this thing. We would end the show, and we would start, and I'd be like, this is John for Cody, Gotham's Caped Crusader, and then we are here with our resident Kryptonian, and then I would say his name. That'd be our introduction. When we would end, I'd be like, thank you guys for tuning in. You can catch us on all our respective social media platforms, and then I'd be like, why don't you sign us off? And then you know what he would say? Keep it geekly. So when he took everything from me, I'm like, I'm gonna start a brand new podcast, and I got a brand new name for it, and we're gonna call it Keeping It Geekly. And I remember our biggest thing was we always wanted to get into interviews. And so when I hit my 50, I think it was like my 30th or 40th episode of doing like the 3 comics a week and 3 news, I reached out to George Medina of Adventures of Wonder Duck. He's my first interview. I did that in November of last year. Did my second interview in February. and then today.
And now in May, you're doing your 42nd.
Yeah. So that's kind of been like my history with how I got into indie comic interviews. Like, you know, and it's one of those things that was petty, but I don't know. Like it's grown. It's, you know, I haven't talked to him in like probably 2 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, like keeping it geekly, like it was driven from like just born out of spite. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm glad you managed to turn that into a beautiful thing.
Yeah, me too. Because my thing is like, I have so much love and passion for doing this. Like, you say I'm doing a service. I don't think it's a service. To me, I'm happy to sit here and talk about your book with you. I get as much enjoyment from doing this as you do talking about it, you know? The fact that I can make a product on the side and put it in a video, that's like icing on the cake for me. I was a salesman for 15 years, so talking is like, that's what I do, you know?
Yeah.
So, dude.
Yeah, no, again, like what you're doing is beautiful. You are, as you said, you're not getting anything out of it except just love for the medium. And I'm basically the same way. Like, even though there is a way to, like, you know, support Eleutheromania, I will never break even with this project. I don't think I ever will. I've made peace with that, and I don't think I'll make peace with, you know, I don't think I'll break even with the next one.
Does it matter to break peace or to break even when that peace that it offers you, that comfort in knowing that you have that out there?
I mean, it would be nice to be able to break even so I can, again, put that money towards making more instead of, like, this is constantly going out of my savings to make comic books. But I'm not doing it to break even. I'm not doing it to make a profit or, you know, gain fame or whatever. I'm doing it because, again, for my love of this medium and because I have things I want to say and I have stories I want to tell.
By the way, guys, there is the website to check this book out for free, but you can buy the physical as well. Man, what an awesome conversation. I love this. We're going to actually, guys, for anyone that's watching, we do have a indie comic showcase that's going to be popping up in 3 hours, about 2 hours and 55 minutes.
Which I will also be there for.
Yeah, Nessa's going to be a co-host with us. It's going to be awesome. We had like 40 people show up this last time. My phone, literally, by the way, guys, has been on the charger, has been charging this whole time. Last time, about an hour into it, we had 40 people deep and my phone died. And I'm like, wow, perfect timing. Like...
Yeah, let's avoid that this time. I'm gonna need to charge my phone as well.
But man, this turned out so good. Like, I always have good expectations for interviews, but the fact that examining your comic like that worked out so well, like I'm just like walking on like that's gonna be something I do from this point forward. Like, that set the tone for anyone.
If the creators are down with basically revealing their entire project on air.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we're doing a book, I would imagine it's been out in print for a couple months to a year. So I don't know. I'm always gonna ask before I do it, though. You know, like I did with you. But dude, because it was so cool just seeing like your ideas and like the way I perceived them. Like, I thought that was such a unique experience. Like, was that the first time you've ever done that?
That is actually the first time I've ever done.
Dude, look at us. It's like
making
Paul
new ground here.
Just look at us. But I think right now is a perfect time to wrap this up, guys. If do you have anything you want to finish off saying to anyone out there to check your book out? It's for free, guys. But like, for anyone that's on the fence, just of even like, clicking that link, what do you want to say to them?
Gosh, thank you for giving it a shot. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope I get to be able to make more and make comics. Like, God, tell stories. There's so much out there in the world that we could talk about and we can tell, and I think everyone should take a chance and make their own comic books, because this is a growing indie space medium, and I think there could always be room for more. We need more.
I think it's really an untapped market, honestly. I think because like you're talking, dude, the growth I'm experiencing, that most of them are indie comic creators.
Exactly.
Like since February, I've grown like almost 650 followers. Like, and that's not like, you know, viral, but that's like pretty healthy growth. That's indication the community is thriving, I would say, you know?
Yeah, we are here. We exist.
So with that being said, let's ask you one of my favorite questions, because I think you would have a awesome response for this as well. So you want people to start writing comics. What if they're having trouble getting their idea to paper, their idea from their head on paper, you know, because sometimes that could be a difficult thing to do. What would be your advice for them to kind of help them like push through that?
Like, organized chaos. Get a notebook and just like literally just like put everything down on there and as soon as you get it out, you'll be able to like articulate it. Like once we have those ideas and we can like actually vocalize them, it'll start to make sense. It'll start to come together. So just get a notebook, just jot down everything you have in your mind, and then slowly piece it together like a jigsaw puzzle, and it will make sense eventually. But you just need to get it out there first in any way.
That is awesome, because the thing is, like, if you don't, you forget, right? Like your mind can only hold on to that idea for so long.
Not only forget, just like it makes sense to you, but it won't make sense to anybody else seeing it, because you understand it better. So that's why I'm like, always put it down on paper, and we'll organize it in any way. Write a plot summary, write like a freaking synopsis, or just write like keywords and like link them together with arrows and lines, because I do that, and then it'll make sense. You'll be able to articulate it.
Hey, man. This whole entire interview was just like a wealth of information. I appreciate you so much for coming on, breaking down not only this but everything that went into it, your story and your future. We got some exclusives too, so dude, thank you so much for that as well. And
thank you for having me.
Oh, go ahead.
I appreciate you so much. It's been a pleasure knowing you for the past like couple of months. So yeah, this is I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, dude. We're going to be having the chance to talk again in just a few hours. Guys, be sure to check out that Indie Comic Space. I have it live on Twitter, so you can check out that tweet. I'll be putting out another little notice here soon. But with that being said, Anas, I think it is time for us to officially end this. I appreciate it. Let's get you back on for that new book that's coming out when you guys get closer to production. I hope you guys all have a fantastic Sunday. It's beautiful out there, guys. Enjoy your day. But most importantly, keep it geekly.